Let's start, however, in East Africa, where Kenya plans to create a mineral exports audit agency in order to properly scrutinize the quantity and quality of minerals being exported from the country to ensure accurate payment of royalties and taxes. Now, the country, which is also smack in the middle of reforming its mining laws, is preparing to conduct a geo-survey to map mineral deposits in the country, and it's hosting its first ever Mining Business and Investment Conference. CCTV's Peter Okaba attended the first day of the conference. He filed this report.
The two-day Mining Business and Investment Conference saw delegates deliberate on how to grow the infant sector. Mining in Kenya faces numerous challenges, including lack of proper data, poor infrastructure, complex regulation, not to mention an unpredictable political environment.
So we really want to see the sanctity of the contracts that we sign with the government being respected, and where you feel you're going to make a decision that's going to affect the investors, it is very critical that you reason out with them so they get to understand this is where we're coming from and this is where we wish to go.
Recent scandals have not helped to instill investor confidence. Uncertainty surrounding licensing and, more recently, a tussle over proposed new royalty rates, described by mining lobbies as exorbitant, have pitted the industry against the government. The Kenyan Ministry of Mines has, however, insisted decisions taken regarding royalties were meant to protect the country's interests.
And investors, we will roll out the red carpet for you, but respect our rules. Pay the royalty that we have agreed you should pay. If you think those royalties are too high, it's bad luck.
The minister also announced the creation of an audit unit to monitor mineral exports. The first mineral exports are expected before February next year, when the first titanium concentrate is shipped from the Base Resources titanium mine in Kwale at the Kenyan coast.
We have looked at what Tanzania, and we are very happy of what Tanzania's audit agency is doing, and we want to learn from them and be able to bring one here. So when we start having the mining companies exporting, we'll be able to audit how much is being exported and how much will be benefit for this country.
Tanzania has been a key partner in enabling Kenya develop its mining policy. Having encountered a lot of hurdles that Kenya now faces, it's now almost 15 years since Tanzania first became an East Africa mining powerhouse.
15 years is not a long time. We are still learning. We are still gaining a lot of experience. Of course, we are still learning from the mistakes that we have done in the past. So for Kenya, I would say this is a great opportunity for you to have a ministry at the right time.
Kenya also intends to focus on transparency and will create an online portal for those applying for mining licenses to use to boost access and transparency.
The mining sector in Kenya is in infancy, but with continued engagement by stakeholders at forums such as the first ever Kenyan Mining Business and Investment Conference, and with continued investment in key supportive infrastructure, then the sector is definitely poised for a very steep growth curve. Peter Okaba, CCTV, Nairobi, Kenya.
Now, Walmart's push for a foothold in East Africa seems to have run into a setback after the Kenyan retailer Naivas said it was no longer interested in selling a controlling stake to the US company's South African subsidiary, Massmart. Now, Naivas' administration manager Gilbert Mwangi is quoted by Reuters as saying that they were fattening the cow, in essence referring to growing the business even further, and they would sell when they are ready and not before. He confirmed that the talks were off. In August, Naivas chair Simon Mukuha said the firm's owners are looking to sell a majority stake to Massmart in order to bring a bit of fresh blood, ideas and capital. Massmart chief executive Grant Patterson is, however, quoted separately as saying that the company is still keen on getting into the Kenyan market. Speaking of South Africa, banks in that country have been swindled out of millions of dollars this year by an international fraud syndicate that stole consumers' card data from restaurant chains. The chief executive of the Payments Association of South Africa, Walter Walker, said all South African banks, including the industry leader Standard Bank and the rivals FirstRand, Barclays and Nedbank, had all been affected. The syndicate behind this attack targeted computers at restaurant chains with a virus named Dexter that essentially skimmed and sent back details of consumer cards once installed into systems. Now, that data was then used to either create cloned cards or then sold on to other criminals. Card fraud has been on the rise in Africa's biggest economy over the last 2 years, despite efforts to replace magnetic stripe cards with a more secure chip variant. Let's get you some more analysis on this. Miriam Bemard is live in London tonight, and in Johannesburg we have Nashina Mohammed, who joins us live from that city. Nashina, let's start with you. Do we have a more clear idea of exactly how much money was lost? All we hear so far is just that millions of dollars was lost.
Yes, good evening to you. Well, previously it was reported that it was costing South African banks hundreds of millions of rand. Now, today I spoke to the organization that monitors the participants in South Africa's payment system, PASA, and they told me that the correct estimation would be in the region of tens of millions of rand. And that's because the investigations is still ongoing, and evaluations in terms of losses and also in terms of potential losses that are accruing to the banks. But I think what would have been interesting is to gauge just how much each bank accrued losses, how much of losses accrue to each of the banks. Perhaps in some way that would be more telling in terms of the weaknesses that may be prevalent in those individual banks. But I think what is encouraging is that the banks have assumed total responsibility for these losses and for these frauds. During the investigations that's ongoing, if it does become apparent that retailers were partly responsible for flaws in the payment system, then banks say that they will be taking that very seriously and they will be holding those retailers to account. So at this stage, the estimation is tens of millions of rand, and I think the organization also is not very forthcoming about the figures, is because they're trying to protect the image and the brand of these banks in South Africa and also of the retailers.
Indeed. Miriam, of course, South Africa's Payments Association saying this latest variant of Dexter was probably originating in Europe. Do we have any idea which criminal syndicate was responsible for this attack?
Rama, that's the million-dollar question. We don't have details yet. It's still being investigated, and that's why officials are very quiet about the whole thing. But we have had similar incidents here in the UK, and some are warning that this could be the start of more to come for South Africa. UK-based security company Forensics is actively working out a solution to help clean up the damage, but many are saying that these attacks should have been caught earlier on, given the first signs of fraud were documented back in January and February of this year. It was only after volumes rose above normal levels that PASA ordered a forensic investigation. The argument is that no one could actually anticipate how quickly this attack would hit so many businesses and cardholders.
Indeed. Now, Sheena, South Africa really has one of the continent's more advanced financial systems. So what weak spots exist in the general financial architecture in South Africa that allowed this attack to happen?
Yes, that's right. In fact, South Africa's banking system has been touted to be the best on the continent, and it also compares very favorably to banking systems in industrialized countries as well. And a recent survey published by the World Economic Forum shows, that's for the period 2012 to 2013, it actually shows that South Africa ranks amongst the top 5 amongst 144 countries when it comes to the soundness of its financial and banking system. I think banks are always susceptible to cyber criminals and to fraudsters. That's because of the nature of their businesses. And so banks will always be susceptible, despite the soundness of their systems and their policies and prevention solutions put in place to avoid fraudsters from attacking banks. And I think what's really encouraging is what experts are saying, that while there will always be a certain level of fraud that will creep through the system, the levels of fraud in South Africa in terms of how it's affecting banks is still very low, despite cybercrime being on the increase in South Africa at the moment. But if we have to look at this particular case that was reported this week, when it comes to card data theft, what's encouraging and what's come out of the investigation so far is they were able to pinpoint a weakness in the system. And that system, and that weakness rather, was around the migration of credit cards and check cards from the magnetic strip variation to the chip, the secure chip variation. What they're saying is that 10 to 20% of credit cards and check cards were not converted to the secure chip variation of cards, and that accounts for about 5 million of those cards that were in circulation. So those card holders were actually victim fell victim to those fraudsters, and that is a problem. But it also is, could be the solution. Banks need to speed up that process and ensure that those cards are converted. It also draws attention to how important it is for cards to be migrated to and converted to the secure chip system. It was reported previously that despite the migration taking place, fraud is still happening in South Africa, but that's not correct. It was, according to the investigation, the weakness was those cards that were not converted to the secure chip variation. Those cards were actually, cardholders were hit by the fraudsters. So that came through during the investigations.
Miriam, over the last decade, we've seen an exponential rise in internet connectivity across Africa. How vulnerable, however, are the economies on the continent to cybercrime?
Roma, Africa is the most vulnerable, mostly because of its growing access to the internet across countries. It's not just about bank security here. You know, a study by Security Affairs shows that variations in cybercrime attacks across African countries depend on the infrastructure and uptake of technology. So whether the bank has that security in place is not just the issue right now. It's a lot bigger than that. European experts told me that cybercrimes fall into two categories. One is bank accounts and identity theft, which we were just speaking of. The other is through mobile app devices, online gambling sites, and entertainment sites. If the technology isn't there, attacks are easy and spread rapidly. To give you an idea, Kenya has lost about $36 million US last year to cybercrime. South Africa, $573 million. When you compare that to the US, for example, yes, it's at $32 billion, but with an economy worth $15 trillion. It shows how high the costs are for African economies.
Indeed, we'll have to leave it there for the time being. Thank you very much for your insights tonight. Now, Shina Mohammed in Johannesburg, South Africa, and Miriam Bemard in London. Now, beyond matters of card fraud, let's move on to Ghana, where the country's president, John Dramani Mahama, says his government will tackle economic challenges to create a more stable and sustainable set of job opportunities while also raising the standard of living at the same time. He made those comments while addressing the country's policy fair, and he pleaded with Ghanaians to be patient while his government addresses the economic challenges they face. He said the government is committed to being accountable to the entire nation as far as its economic policies, programs and activities are concerned. The Ghana Policy Fair is a flagship event to the government's Ministry of Information, which was started in 2010. It's designed to allow the government to share its policies with the people. Now, the fair also includes exhibitions by various ministries and where they explain their role in the economy.
It is always important that such forums are organized so that people in the country will be able to come here and have a feel of what is happening in the country, what the various ministries are doing, what the other departments are doing, and exactly what the government is doing to improve their conditions of service.
Democracy is a chart that all African countries have agreed to charter. It's a part that we have all agreed to charter. Now, if we are doing it, we should do it at least to the best of our ability. And you can only have a very good democracy where people are part of the decision-making body.
What we are trying to showcase here is to first of all inform them or educate them that we have 3 arms of service from the Ghana Armed Forces. Our core duties for the defense of the nation by land, by sea and by air.
Now, tax on the turnover of rubber factories in Cote d'Ivoire risks damaging the industry as a whole, as farmers there are complaining about a drop in sales. Now, the country has 16 rubber processing plants, but some of them have been unable to pay farmers for deliveries made in June and July. Experts in the country now warning that the new tax will lead to the smuggling of rubber from Cote d'Ivoire to Ghana and Liberia, both of which do not impose such taxes. CCTV's Clementine Logan has more.
Cote d'Ivoire may be Africa's leading rubber producer, but that output could be in danger. That's according to local rubber farmers and producers. The West African nation produced 255,000 tonnes in 2012. That's more than half of the continent's total production. But according to Modeste Wajas, head of Cote d'Ivoire's Natural Rubber Association, recent taxes levied by the government are hurting producers and he fears that this may shut down the industry.
Today, the industry is facing a drastic problem to the extent that it threatens its very existence. The agro-industries that have been purchasing our products since 2012 now have to pay new taxes. The new government has now imposed a value-added tax of 5% and has demoralized many farmers.
In 2012, the Ivorian government introduced a 5% tax on processors' turnover. Some in the industry say this has dried up their cash flow amid disappearing margins. While Asian producers, including Indonesia, Thailand and Malaysia, dominate world rubber output, Ivorian farmers, frustrated by cocoa's low returns, have increasingly turned to rubber and the more stable income it provides.
We are wondering what will happen to us, even though we, the rubber farmers, are the ones who have reduced unemployment in Cote d'Ivoire, because we have all kinds of work in the rubber farming industry.
Analysts say the taxes were introduced to increase government revenues, but may be detrimental to producers and farmers. Clementine Logan, CCTV.
Time for a short break here on Biz Africa. Here's what's coming up next. Millions of Somalis are anxiously awaiting the decision from a UK court on Dahab Shield's seeking an injunction. We'll have the details when we come back.
BizAsia. Asia means business.
Welcome back. Millions of Somalis are anxiously awaiting a decision from a court in the UK which has been considering a case that could cut a crucial financial lifeline to a post-conflict country. Dahab Shield, a cash transfer company, has accused UK-based Barclays Bank of abusing its dominant market position to close down accounts which Dahab Shield has with it. Now, the Somali company has sought an injunction against Barclays' decision with a perspective from Mogadishu. Here's CCTV's Mohammed Hirmoge.
Millions of Somalis rely on remittances from abroad through companies like Dahab Shield as their basic lifeline. Barclays, however, says it is concerned that terrorists could as well be using the informal money transfer system. It is closing all 250 accounts it operated on behalf of Somali-run money transfer agencies. But among those who will be affected are students. Abdiaziz Sheikh studies medicine in Mogadishu. His family depends on remittances from kin abroad for monthly expenses. For Abdiaziz, a court verdict against Dahab Shield means dropout from university for him.
I'm a medicine student. I have 2 more years of study, but I might find myself at home soon if Barclays wins the case.
Abdiaziz's family receives remittances from relatives in Britain, the first place to be affected if the court upholds Barclays' position on remittances.
Our money particularly comes from the UK, from my brothers and sisters there. So if remittances are affected, it serves as our lifeline.
President Mohamud said the lives of millions of innocent Somalis depended on the decision by the British court. Students like Abdiaziz too have an appeal to the British court.
Now I call on Barclays and the court to consider the innocent millions who will suffer if these remittances fail for even a single month. They should consider that our education will be affected.
A global business, Dahab Shield Bank provides cash transfer services to millions of Somalis through the informal Hawala transfer system. Mohammed Irmogi, CCTV, Mogadishu.
South Africa's Public Enterprises Minister Malusi Gigaba says that the country's construction sector is yet to properly atone for anti-competitive behavior, even after suffering heavy fines. 15 construction firms in the country paid fines totaling $140 million US, but it seems the government there is not satisfied with its pound of flesh. Investigations into the sector started in February. By June, they had revealed that more than 300 companies had been involved in bid rigging. Now, according to the country's Competition Commission, essentially these companies created the illusion of competing for government business by submitting sham tenders or inflating quoted prices so that other conspirator companies would therefore win the bid. In other cases, the conspirators paid the losing bidders a fee to cover the cost of their sham tendering.
We can't say paying a fine is sufficient. It deals with the matter, puts it behind us, and we move on. We need to agree on what are the socio-economic programs we are going to implement so that the sector demonstrates remorse. What I need to emphasize is that we must do it in a manner that doesn't result in a fallout.
Quick run through the markets now. Let's see what your money has been doing for you on this Thursday. Gains in West Africa and South Africa, but not in East Africa. The all-share index in Nigeria ending the day in the green, up by over half a percentage point. Pretty much the same story really in South Africa. It ended the day higher by 0.3. In Kenya, however, different story. Still below that 5,000 mark on the NSE 20. It ended the day marginally lower, down 0.08 percentage points. Today, of course, the Egyptian market is closed. It will be closed this entire week due, of course, to festivities related to Eid ul-Adha. On to sports now with Penina.